to the third edition of West Springfield Rotary's Westside Legacy Stories. I am Hayden Kostansky, and here today with me is the man, the myth, the legend, Ray Hershel.
Wow.
Hi, how you doing?
Thanks for that introduction.
No problem, no problem. All right, so can you tell me your name, your birth date, and where you were born from?
I think I can remember that. Thank you very much.
Totally.
Name is Ray Hershel. I was born October 7th, 1945. That makes me 73 years old this year. And I was born at Providence Hospital in Holyoke, Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Same with me. I'm born Holyoke as well, too. So how long you been in Westside for?
I've lived in West Springfield with my wife and family for about 40 years. I grew up in Chicopee, but came to Westside about 40 years ago, and have enjoyed every single day that we've been here. At the time, my wife and I were looking for a nice community in which to bring up our family. We looked at the schools, the transportation access, it had fiscal stability. So we felt it was a good community for us to settle in, settle down, and raise our family. And we have been here ever since, very happily, I might add.
Wow. So any sort of changes you've noticed over the past years?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes I've noticed is that when we first moved here, the form of town government, for example, was an old town meeting form of government. And as the town grew, as the budget grew, as the issues, political issues, got a little more complex, the town, I think, advisedly went to a mayor-city council form of government. So the mayor is in charge of coordinating things now, running the city with the city council. And I think it was a good move for the town, given the complexities of the issues today that we face in the mayor going ahead with, with priorities for the town and so forth and so on. That was one of the big things. I think West Springfield over the years has become a more diverse community, I think to its benefit as well. But the kindness of the people here, the stability of the people here has been the same all along. So it's a very comfortable community, I guess I would say, in which to live and grow up.
Right, do you miss anything about it, like about anything from the past?
No, I just I feel the changes that have been implemented, the changes that we've gone through, have been good changes. I remember we moved to the street where we live off Rogers Avenue, and at the time, there were several elderly couples, several seniors who lived on our street. Wonderful people. They were so kind to us and our kids and everything. Obviously, over the years, they have passed. So that camaraderie of the neighborhood with these seniors who just loved kids, who reached out to our kids, who had such a good, friendly relationship with them. That closeness, I miss a bit. It's a different dynamic today where you live and with the people surrounding you. But back then, I remember just how closely we were with some of these older folks who lived on the street.
So, what was it like growing up and stuff as well too?
I grew up in Chicopee, not too far from West Springfield. I grew up in the Sheridan Circle project. It was a housing project in Chicopee Falls with my mom, my brother and sister, and myself, our family of 5. And Sheridan Circle was originally built for housing for veterans of Westover, so they could have housing. Eventually, veterans were allowed in from other branches. My dad was an Army veteran, so we grew up very happily there until probably I was in the 4th grade. Then we moved to another section of Chicopee and lived with our grandparents in a 2-family home. So we lived there through high school, college, and then of course after college is when I met my wife, and then we moved to West Springfield. So my recollections of my early years were very warm ones. We were a close family. We did a lot together. I loved my brother and sister, and it was just those family occasions, whether it's, Thanksgiving, Christmas. We'd vacation together at the same lake in New Hampshire during the summer. So it was a warm family, close-knit relationship that I still fondly remember to this day.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
What is it that brought you to Westside, by the way, too?
I think it was the fact that we were looking for a good community in which to raise our family, someplace we felt we could stay for a while, a stable community. And it just so happened at the time, almost coincidentally, my wife was a visiting nurse and was making some medical visits. And she was driving down Rogers Avenue and saw a house for sale sign. So she at the time just happened to drive up the street, looked at the house, and she fell in love with the house almost immediately. She got home and said, "Hon, you got to come over and see this house. I think I found a house where we could live in West Springfield. It's just what we were looking for." I had a nice big yard, a nice older home. And sure enough, we took a look at it. We loved it. We thought it'd be a great place to live. And one thing led to another. We had a good realtor. We bought the house and moved in 40 years ago. And you know what? We're there to this day. We're still there.
Wow.
So that's what brought us here, and that's what's kept us here as well.
So any good old memories from those days as well, too?
Yeah, I think just raising a family, when you first raise your own family, there are special moments all over the place. Our children were born when we lived in that house. The family get-togethers at the house, the school system our kids grew up in, the schools they went to, the sports they played. I mean, they were on, little league soccer teams, baseball teams. So the camaraderie with the community and, friends, the sports thing going on, and the good schools. We really like the schools in West Springfield. Kids got a good education, went through high school. Two of my kids went through West Springfield High School and moved on to college after that. So it was, kind of a continuation of our family life when I was growing up. But it was just a very satisfying and a comfortable place in which to live and bring up a family, a safe community. So that's why we are located here, and that's why we've stayed here for so long.
Oh, wow. And so, as a professional, you've covered a lot of stories, like many, many stories.
Oh, yes.
So, do you remember any in particular that you could share with us?
Yeah. I've been blessed, and I've been blessed with a passion for being a reporter. That's what I've always wanted to do. Have loved the business. Spent 50 wonderful years at Channel 40 on the air. Recently retired April of 2018 after 50 years. But so many interesting stories I've had a chance to cover over the years. One of the most memorable was one of the very first television stories I covered, because when I first started in 1968, I started as a radio newscaster on WHYN radio. And then after a couple of years, I transitioned over into television. At the time, WHYN radio, AM, FM, and TV were all in the same building, all under the same ownership. So for me to transition from radio to TV was almost seamless. About 1972, my news director, Durham Caldwell, asked me to cover a pretty good story, a big story. This was the return of prisoners of war who were held captive over in North Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And many of these prisoners of war had local ties and connections. They were stationed at Westover. They had family and friends at Westover. So the day that they were coming back to Westover, you can imagine, there were hundreds and hundreds of people on the tarmac waiting to greet them. I remember it was bitterly cold. It was at night. The film camera we were using, the Bolex camera with 16 millimeter film, kept freezing up. It was so cold outdoors that my photographer had to wrap the camera in a blanket to keep it warm so the reels wouldn't freeze up, just to record that story. And I remember distinctly when that plane landed and taxied on the tarmac. As soon as it stopped, the door opened, the steps came down, and as soon as these veterans started marching off the plane, Their family members just stormed the plane, the tarmac. You've never seen so many tears of joy in all your life. It was very powerful, very emotional, and it was an eye-opening story for me in that I realized the power of television in conveying a story of that magnitude and that emotion. And photographer did a wonderful job in filming this emotion, which we're able to carry on to the people that day. The story was well received, and from then on, the news director just happened to, give me some good stories to cover. But I'll never ever forget that night, that moment, and just the raw emotion of the night as these prisoners came home to their loved ones, who obviously were overjoyed that these people were coming back alive.
Oh, wow. Jumping back in the past as well too, how was your childhood? What was that like?
It was a very happy childhood. I had two loving parents, hardworking parents, who were tremendous role models for me. So we had good times. I was the oldest of the three children. I had a twin brother and sister. I was the oldest. So we had just a very close family relationship. Mom and dad were, blue collar workers, and they taught us the value of hard work, being respectful of others, and values and traits which I've tried to carry on throughout my professional career and life as well. So just a lot of smiles, a lot of good times, a lot of happy times. But I think the love of family among our own members was what really sticks out in my mind. We were warm, we were close, and we really loved each other.
What was your earliest memory as well too?
Oh, that goes back a ways now. You're dating me here. Um, just as a kid, growing up in the project there in Chicopee Falls, uh, you know, uh, it was a unique place because a lot of the people who lived there were veterans like my dad. So they had children about the same age. So everybody in that neighborhood, in that project, got to know each other. We did things together. We were always out in the fields playing ball or something, just uh, very, very open, very friendly, very safe. We'd visit each other's houses, go over there, and their moms would cook us cookies and cake and everything else. So it was just a very friendly, warm atmosphere. So it was just that, I think that growing up, just that feeling of security, safety, and love, I think that brought us all together.
Oh, speaking of siblings, were you the oldest?
I certainly was. Yeah, I was the oldest. And my brother and sister were a couple of years younger than I was. So I was the oldest. I was the oldest sibling.
How was that relationship like as well too with your brother and sister?
It was good. I mean, I had a sister and a brother. They were both twins, so they kind of looked up, I guess, to their older brother. So I always try to be a little bit of a role model for them. But of course, with the siblings, you do have your little quarrels once in a while and things like that.
Yeah.
But it was pretty normal the way we grew up. They kind of looked up to me, and I kind of felt good about that. I kind of try to protect them and give them good advice and be a role model for them as well as I grew up.
Hmm. Okay. So how so you grew up in Chicopee,
I
as
did.
you mentioned before. So and now in West Side, where did you continue to live?
We moved into our home about 40 years ago off Rogers Avenue, and we have stayed there for 40 years. We
Wow.
did not move at all. We moved in, stayed in the same house, updated the house a little, but the house suited our purposes. It had a nice yard. It was on a nice quiet street, had a good backyard, and it was a nice place to live as a family growing up. As the kids grew up, as they got into different areas and so forth. So it was the perfect house for us then. And today, the kids have moved on. They're grown up. They have kids of their own. So my wife and I are there kind of as empty nesters, but there's a lot of memory, a lot of nostalgia in that home, which we still love today.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. Rolling on into your education, your school years, were
Yeah.
you given any sort of nickname at all?
Um,
Just,
Not too much, not really. My my dad's name was Raymond. He was a senior, and they used to call him Rowe for short, Rowe. So my dad was Big Rowe, and I was called by many Rowie, just as a nickname. The small Rowe, you know what I mean, Rowie. So that was a cute nickname. That was mostly a family thing, though, that they called me as we grew up. So, eventually we grew out of that, but that's the little bit of a nickname based on the fact that I am a junior and my dad was Raymond Senior.
Friends. Did you have any friends growing up as well too?
I had a few friends, yep. My closest friend was the friend I had in high school. We were good friends, close friends. He lived in Chicopee at the time in a little different section than I did. We met in high school. Didn't get to know each other till high school. We were in a few classes and seemed to hit it off pretty well. Had a lot in common. He was a good student. He had a good scientific mind. He majored in chemistry, eventually got his doctorate in polymer chemistry, went on to work in the field. I got into the writing and broadcasting field. But we became very close. And the good thing about that friendship, we did so much together in high school, is that today we maintain the friendship. He and his wife and their daughter live in New Jersey, but he does come home to Chicopee. He maintains his mom's home in Chicopee. So he does come home every few weeks, and every time he does, we generally get together, have dinner, go out to breakfast or whatever to keep our friendships. Matter of fact, we just saw him not too long ago. We had our 55th high school reunion, Chicopee High Class of 1963, so 55-year reunion, which was a wonderful reunion as well. So that friendship that we formed in high school continues to this day stronger than ever. He's a good close friend.
That's fantastic. What did you guys like to do for fun?
Oh, I can't tell you that.
Oh,
Well, no, typical stuff. Back in those days, we went out, kids went out, we played sports all over the place. I grew up next to Zot Park, so there had football fields, baseball fields, playgrounds, swimming pools. So we were out there all the time, either shooting hoops, playing baseball, playing football, and so forth. And back in those days, too, we liked to frequent the old drive-through diners, like restaurants, like an Abdal's, where you'd drive in, you'd order your food from outside, and the waitresses would come up on roller skates to your door, take your order.
oh,
I'll have a root beer and a chili dog or whatever. You'll go back, bring them to your car. And it was kind of a social meeting place, if you will, because all the kids used to hang out there. So it was almost like a big party with the kids. You'd see faces you saw there before, you'd see friends there. So you got to meet new people, reacquaint yourself with old friends. So it was kind of a coming together of a lot of people of the same age in a very social atmosphere, kind of like something you'd see out of American Graffiti, the movie American Graffiti, that kind of ambiance and atmosphere. So it was just good old-fashioned fun.
oh, nice. So you were mentioning a reunion
Yeah.
for 55 years. So, do any of your classmates remember you, or how do they remember you at all?
They were flabbergasted. Well, they have been flabbergasted because we had a 50th year reunion. And in high school, I was probably, of the 500 plus people in our class, I was probably the most unassuming and quiet kid you could imagine. Very shy, very withdrawn. And every time I go to a reunion or see a classmate, they scratch their heads and they say, I cannot believe you got into broadcasting and public speaking. You were the quietest kid in high school. Of all the kids in the class, you'd be the last one on my list that I figured would get into something like broadcasting and be on the air like that. So we kind of have a laugh about that. But in high school, very shy, very quiet, very unassuming, didn't make any waves. But when I went to college, I sort of blossomed there, I think, with the help of a lot of good teachers and my experience at Emerson College. So I sort of came out of my shell, if you will, in college. But in high school, strictly very shy and unassuming guy.
So even though you were shy in high school, did you have any like awesome memories at all?
Yeah, we had good memories in high school. We had some good memories. I played some JV baseball in high school for a couple of years, and at the time, Chicopee High had only one high school, so all the city kids went to one school. So we had fantastic sports teams, really, really good sports teams. Our baseball team, for example, won the state championship 3 years running. Our star pitcher, Al Stanek, went on to play professionally for the San Francisco Giants before he injured his arm. So, a lot of good memories with regard to that. But I think also I had I was fortunate to have such good teachers in high school, and I've been blessed all along with that, and in college as well. But there was one teacher in high school really who was pivotal, I think, in my decision to go into broadcasting and become a reporter. He was an English teacher. His name was Mr. Aldrich. And we had a pretty good relationship. You know, I'd confide in him. And when I had mentioned to him that I was interested in broadcasting as a career, he had suggested Emerson College in Boston. He
Oh,
knew of it because he went to school in Boston himself at Boston University. And he said, you know, for what you want to do, Ray, in broadcasting, this is an excellent college. It might suit you well because it's small. It's very focused in terms of majors, communications, journalism, broadcasting, English, liberal arts, that kind of thing. And he thought I would do well in that kind of environment as opposed to a big, large university because of my own personality. I checked it out, did some research, looked it up, and I kind of said, I think he's onto something there. So, make a long story short, I did apply to Emerson. Luckily, I had some pretty good grades in high school. I was awarded a good scholarship at Emerson College, which was very, very beneficial to me and my parents, both who worked, some of them 2 jobs just to put me through college. So it was his influence, I think, that geared me toward Emerson College. And from there, that was the critical, pivotal moment in my becoming a broadcaster and following up in newscasting. In 1963, my freshman year in college, um, November 22nd, 1963 was the day that President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. And as a freshman in college at the time, I remember how devastated everyone was. And we actually, on that day, a group of us from the Berkeley Beacon, the college newspaper, put together a special edition of the school newspaper just that day on the facts that we knew at the time. And we published the paper and we took stacks of the paper. A lot of us went out to Beacon Street where cars were parked at the light and started handing out special editions of the Berkeley Beacon, giving these people there in the cars their first look at the written word about what happened in Dallas that tragic, tragic day. And that was another key moment, I think, in my career that solidified my decision to follow up as a news broadcaster, as a reporter. Just the interest in that terrible, tragic event as it moved forward. So very good memories at Emerson College too. I think the way they helped me professionally develop.
hmm. So, getting on more on that later. So, you wanted to be a journalist
I did.
before becoming broadcasting, right?
I did. I had that interest in broadcasting since I was in high school. Initially I was debating whether or not I might want to get into sports broadcasting or news broadcasting, but I always had that feeling that maybe broadcasting was the career for me. And at the time, it was not as, I'd say, popular as it is today. Communications is very popular today, but and radio was bigger than television in those days. So radio was the medium you wanted to get into. So at Emerson, I was able to work on 2 radio stations, the TV station, and then eventually, after I got my first job at WHYN Radio in Springfield, a commercial job, transitioned into television from there. So it was a radio television transition, and television I felt was the future for me. And I'm glad I did choose television at that time, transitioned into TV, and was able to, do fairly well at it. Worked stories that I wanted to work over the years. And the station treated me well. They gave me good stories to cover, and hopefully I returned a favor for them in terms of doing a good job for them over the years in presenting these stories to the public. So that interest, if you will, in broadcasting just blossomed, just grew in college from a news perspective and current events, and got more interested in things of that nature. I worked my senior year at a radio station in Worcester, which was a CBS affiliate. And again, very news oriented. They had greats on the radio like Walter Cronkite, Douglas Edwards, Richard C. Hodelet, Eric Sevareid, all great broadcasters in their own right. So I kind of looked at them, looked at their styles, listened to how they put their stories together and so forth. So, and kind of developed a style of my own, if you will, so that when I did get out of college and I was able to start in broadcasting, I felt at least I could hit the ground running, if you will, so to speak.
Oh, wow. So jumping right into career questions, so you've retired now.
I have.
And so now, are you still volunteering for anything, or?
I do. I've been retired, as we do this interview, about 6 months, and been very active. I miss some of the folks that I worked with at the TV station. At times I missed the job. But after 50 years, it was time to start a new chapter in my life with my wife. And to answer your question, we do try to give back to the community as much as we possibly can. This area of Western Massachusetts has been great to me and my family. In my own small way, I'd like to give back a little that I can. My wife feels the same way. We volunteer. We do some work in the community. I've been involved in things like the Valley Press Club, Jericho, which is an organization that helps the disabled in Holyoke. Also involved in the CARE Coalition here in West Springfield. We do some community or volunteer work for our church, St. Thomas in West Springfield. So I try to keep active in the community as best I can, and utilize my talents in any way, shape, or form that might help people in the community too. If I get a call to do a speaking engagement, MC event for an organization, that kind of thing, to use my professional skills to help others in the community.
So, and also, if retiring, how old were you when you retired as well, too?
I was 72,
22?
and then since that time, I had a birthday in October,
Oh.
so I am a whole 73 right now as we do this interview. So, good retirement age I'm at it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, totally. So you were with a lot of organizations as well too, with
Yep.
helping the community and stuff. What did you do specifically in with those organizations?
Well, while I was in broadcasting, I did a lot of work with some organizations like Muscular Dystrophy Association, Cerebral Palsy Association, and these were organizations that help people with disabilities, and also were tied into television telethons. So we would carry telethons, the Jerry Lewis telethon for years and years and years on Labor Day on our station, the Cerebral Palsy telethon for years and years and years on our station, and I would be involved in hosting the show locally at our TV station. But that would also involve working in the community, doing stories that aired on the telethon. So you'd meet people, disabled people, you'd meet caregivers, you'd meet organizations that help them along to tell their story to the public so that they, in fact, would, send in a donation, help these people, maybe get involved in themselves. So that was still a major part of my work as a broadcaster too, doing these community-related events. And of course, you'd help them as much as you could with their various fundraisers and things of this nature. And as I transitioned from television into retirement, got into these other organizations I just mentioned a few weeks ago. So I do feel fortunate, I do feel blessed, and I try to give back to the community as best I can and as effectively as I can.
Any sort of life lessons as well too during your whole career as well too?
I do. I think I was. People ask me all the time. You worked in the business for 50 years at the same station. How in the world were you able to do it? And I feel very fortunate. I feel very blessed. I just had a passion for reporting, for broadcasting. It was in my blood, and I loved to do it. I loved going to work every single day. Some days were harder than others, some days were easier than others, because you never knew in news reporting what you'd be covering on a day-to-day basis. You could be out covering a major breaking news story that you hadn't anticipated. You could be covering a visit of a presidential candidate to the area, a visit by the governor, anything. It ran the gamut from A to Z. So that was the exciting part of the job, not knowing what you'd be covering in a day in and day out basis. So that kept the job very, very exciting, I think, over the years. I was also fortunate to work with some tremendously talented colleagues and mentors, people who helped me along the way develop as a young reporter, and who were there for me when questions arose. I told you I started in radio in 1968. It was April, and the day I started was 10 days after Martin Luther King was shot and killed in Memphis.
Oh.
And then about 2 months later, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles while running for the presidential nomination. There were protests over the Vietnam War at the time. There were civil rights demonstrations going on all over the country, including many right here in Springfield, Massachusetts. So it was a tumultuous time in our nation's history when I first started on the radio. And as a cub reporter, I was trying to break into this radio station that really had top-notch reporters working for it, award-winning news department. I felt a little bit over my head, but I had some great people who took me under their wing, who mentored me along the way to get my feet on the ground and help develop my skills as a reporter too. So I'll forever be grateful to them for helping me along the way, and that really helped me develop and mature as a young reporter, getting into the television end of it too. So very, very helpful, very fortunate, I think, over the years. And I had a very a good supportive family. My wife, by the way, who I met at the radio station where I worked. I started working in 1968. I met my wife, Maureen, in 1969, a year later. Her sister had worked at the TV and radio station. I was out chatting with her sister one day in the lobby, and Maureen walked in. We got to chit-chatting. One thing led to another. Her sister fixed us up on a date. We hit it off. We were engaged within a year and married within a year in 1969. So it was fate, divine providence, whatever you want to call it, that brought us together, I think, a year after I started at the radio station. So that was really one of the reasons why I have stayed in the area. We brought up our family in this area and stayed at that station for 50 years. So it was sort of a perfect storm, if you will, of things that helped me along in my career at that station.
Oh, okay. And if you can do anything right now too, what would you do as well too?
I want to keep active. I like to keep helping people as much as I can. I enjoy meeting young people. I do a lot of speaking engagements at schools and talk to young aspiring journalists, broadcasters, or kids. So I enjoy giving back to the community in that regard, because I'm very optimistic about the future. I think our future is very bright. We have some bright young students out there, bright young kids, and I think they will do very, very well for themselves. Last year, I had an opportunity to be involved in an award ceremony at Emerson College, my alma mater in Boston. And during that ceremony, awards were being given out to student broadcasters who had excelled and won awards. And I was really flabbergasted at just how good the quality of their work was. So I feel very confident, very comfortable about the future of journalism, given the young people that are getting into the field today, because it's much more competitive than it was when I first got into it. But we have some bright young people who are dedicated, who are passionate about their field as well. So I think the future bodes well for them. So I'd like to help them as much as I can as well.
All right, so we're just gonna take a quick break here. So stay tuned for West Side Story Legacies as well too.
Okay,
So,
excellent.
all right, we're
Sounds
back.
good.
All right, welcome back to Westside Legacy Stories. I'm Hank Stansky, and I'm here with Ray Hershel still. We're going to be going to historical periods and family and reflection, and kicking it right off. So, what can you recall about certain events like Vietnam or JFK's assassination? I know you've briefly talked about him before.
Yeah, the JFK had a tremendous impact on me, the assassination, because I was a freshman in college, and it really uh, focused my attention on news, current events, and that sort of thing. And uh, the 60s were a very, very difficult time in our country's history. So much going on, a controversial Vietnam War, civil rights demonstrations. So it coincided with my career, the beginning of my career as a reporter, as a broadcast journalist. So my perspective uh, comes from that of being reporting those events, witnessing those events firsthand, and trying to convey that information to the public as well. But remember, uh, oh, so much pain and suffering through that period, whether it related to the Vietnam War and all the lives lost, all the injured veterans coming back this country. The assassinations during that period of time were just tragic, changed our country's history. So there was a lot going on for the people to just grasp and try to comprehend at that difficult time as well. But as a reporter, it was equally as difficult, trying to report, get information, and present those stories as well. We're here because we're talking about the legacy in West Springfield and so forth. And I remembered a great individual who lived here in the West Side named Don Dowd, who was a great friend of the Kennedy family. And every time Senator Kennedy, one of the Kennedys, would come to Western Massachusetts, Don Dowd was sort of their campaign person here, if you will, their staff person here, who would, stay with the media, inform the media, and stay with the senator. And I remember Don Dowd uh, was there the night that Robert Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles. And I remember talking to Don about that particular night and how horrifying it was. Because as a reporter, when you cover these events, you try to find or get information interviews from people who were there firsthand because they saw it happening. And he was in the back of the room after Robert Kennedy's speeches. He was walking off the podium and heard the pandemonium and mayhem after the shots were fired, wondering, what is going on here? And then realizing the horror after Robert Kennedy went down shot. But that's something that impacted him tremendously for the rest of his life, just having been in that room and witnessing it firsthand, having been so friendly with the Kennedys. So he was able to provide us with some very firsthand factual information, I think, about that horrible night. And, in his house in West Springfield, he had pictures of the Kennedy family, all the good times. He was in Hyannisport a lot with the family and had a lot of tremendous memories and photographs from his relationship with the Kennedys. But that's just one person with the Kennedys who was able to provide a lot of information, a lot of good interviews over the years about the Kennedy family. He was our connection here in West Springfield to the Kennedys and their legacy as well.
Oh, wow. And also, so just dialing back a little while in the past. So World War II. I know you were born in '45.
Correct.
But was your family or you as well too? Were you any of you affected by this as well?
Yeah, very much so. My dad was an Army veteran, served in World War II. I had three uncles who were also in the military during that era. One in the Navy, another one in the Army in the Pacific Theater, and a third one in the military as well. So, yeah, the war did have an impact on our family, as it did all other families
Oh,
as well.
yeah, of course.
And a couple of my uncles came home from the war, and they weren't entirely the same. You could tell they had gone through a lot of trauma. seen a lot in the war, and it affected them for the rest of their lives. My dad was pretty good when he came back from World War II, and didn't talk a lot about what they saw, what they did. But that's the way the veterans were. I think they kept things to themselves, kept things inside. But yeah, the war did have a profound effect on the family and many other families as well, because that age group, that era, my dad's age and so forth, they were the ones who volunteered and went out and served their country in their time of need.
What about the Korean War as well, too? How was that?
Korean War came a little bit later. I knew a couple of people who served in the Korean War. My One of my brother-in-laws served in the Korean War as well, and they call that the Unforgotten War, because World War II, the Vietnam War were publicized as well. But sacrifice our veterans made in Korea was very significant as well. People should never ever forget that situation over there between North and South Korea and the sacrifice made by veterans over there. So yeah, those wars, inevitably you will know at my age people who have served in those wars, have friends who have served in the war, relatives who have served in those wars, and made sacrifices. Some unfortunately made the ultimate sacrifice and did not come back. But yeah, that's a war that should not be forgotten either.
So now that we've covered the 40s and 50s and
Yeah.
60s, what about the 70s or 80s or 90s?
Yeah, as we move forward here, let me go back here. I remember I told you I started in '68, and one memorable event I'll never forget. '69, of course, when we walked on the moon, when Neil Armstrong was the
Oh,
first
yeah,
man to walk on the
of
moon.
course.
Seeing that on television, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Television really coming of age when you see something like that happening. Can you imagine watching somebody walk on the moon? But that was a magnificent historical moment. And then as you got into the '70s, some major stories. I mean, '72 was Watergate, and that was just a devastating story for our country in terms of pulling us apart. And but it did show the value of good, honest, investigative journalism that the Washington Post unveiled, Bernstein and Woodward unveiled through digging and getting this story out, which eventually led, of course, to President Nixon's resignation. So that story had gone on for a while, but a major story, and as reporters going through that, that was very significant as well in the '70s. So Watergate was certainly a big story that we will all remember.
What about the tech 1980s tech boom as well too?
Yeah, we got into the technical age, and more developed technology-wise, and I just look at it from my own point of view as a reporter in the technology and how it's advanced over the years,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
and it just exploded. I mean, back in '68 when I started, as I related that story about the POW return, we would shoot our stories on 16 millimeter film. We had an old Bolex camera. You know what? When you shot that film, you had to go back to the studio, put that film in a chemical processor to have it develop like a picture. When that film came out, you had editors look at it, scene frame by frame, and splice and glue the scenes together. They were put on a separate reel on a projector that ran on the news. That's how we got our news stories on the air back then. So it was tedious, it was time consuming. But over the years, of course, we changed into videotape, then digital technology. Now we're into high definition television, and everything is done electronically. So, reporters go out on the road now with a P2 card in their cameras. It's the size of a postage stamp. And you can get hours and hours and hours of video on that little P2 card that's inserted into a computer, edited and processed and so forth. So the technology is just unbelievable. And the drive towards social media now, with the advent of social media, Facebook, Twitter, everything going on, people are seeing and experiencing news as it happens. Whether it's through live broadcasting, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's through the media, social media. There are more people out there with cameras, so events are covered now as they happen, more so than they ever have been before. So the technology boom has been tremendous, and it really has pushed the television industry forward as far as reporting is concerned, because that technology is always pushing you as a reporter to get the information out faster, get it on the air quicker. And the challenge is, of course, with that technology, you got to make sure you get it on accurately too, because it's most important not just to get it on first, but to get it on accurately. And sometimes, the technology is almost ahead of you with regard to getting that information on the air. So yeah, technology has changed tremendously, no question about it. And it's changing every day, every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now jumping into more recent events, 9/11.
Yes.
Yes. So what can you tell us? How would that affect you?
Never forget that day. I was on my way into work and heard the news on the radio. Could not believe it. Got into work that day, and we were all just stunned, saddened, shocked about seeing those Twin Towers go down and the planes crashing into the towers and the Pentagon as well. And as reporters, you're thinking, oh my God, this is going on in New York City. What do we do here in Western Massachusetts to try to follow up the story? So you get a lot of reaction. At that time, we had a morning reporter who, when it first happened, we actually sent a reporter to New York for a couple of days to cover the events going on. Then eventually we would do follow-up stories as the cleanup continued, the search for bodies continued, that kind of thing, and just the dynamic of that story. And of course, it was a story that impacted us here in Western Massachusetts, because there were several people in Western Massachusetts who lost their lives in the Twin Towers collapse. The most notable, of course, was Melissa Harrington Hughes, who was born in West Springfield here. Her dad still lives in West Springfield. So that impacted local folks tremendously as well. And to the credit of the town of West Springfield, they have erected an eternal flame in memory not only of Melissa, but all those who lost their lives on 9/11. It's right in the town common. They have a ceremony every year commemorating the anniversary of that tragedy, at which time Melissa and all the others are honored, are remembered for losing their lives like that. So I think it's good that the town did do this, because it keeps the memory alive. People should never ever forget what happened and why that happened. But it did have a profound impact here in Western Massachusetts. And as you can imagine, as local reporters, you have to try to reach out to families who lost loved ones. That's the most difficult part of the job, when you have to try to approach somebody who has lost a loved one, whether through it's an accident, whether it's through an act of violence or whatever, to try to get some information or comment from them. Difficult, difficult, difficult. So we had our challenges as well about reaching out to these local people to try to be as respectful as we possibly could, but still tell their story as well. And this is the type of story that didn't end in a week or a month or a year. It went on and on and on with the terrorism threat. So 9/11 changed the culture and the climate in our country with regard to our vulnerability, our security, and it has made this country a completely different country in terms of security and keeping people safe since that time. But do distinctly remember that day, how it happened, couldn't believing what we saw, but it had an impact here in Western Massachusetts as well, as I told you, through the victims who lost their lives.
Yeah, of course. And so, leading up to 2011, almost 8 years ago,
Yeah.
the tornado in Western Mass. What can you tell us about that as well, too?
Interesting. I was working that day as well,
Yeah.
and we were sitting in the newsroom. It was late afternoon. I was working on our stories for the day, and then our weather people started coming in saying, there's some severe weather heading our way. There, could be a tornado, this, that, and the other thing. Eventually, one thing led to another, And then we were all bracing ourselves, and then we had a video camera set up downtown on one of the buildings, and it was pointed toward the Memorial Bridge in West Springfield. And we could not believe our eyes when we saw what was coming over that bridge. This was that dark cloud, that swirling cloud. It was literally a tornado coming right over the Memorial Bridge, over the Connecticut River into the south end of Springfield,
Yeah.
whipping up debris, knocking down buildings. It was something that you'd see in a movie like Twister or something of that nature. But here you were to see this in an urban area downtown. This weren't any cornfields, out in no man's land. This was an urban setting where this tornado swept through. Parts of West Springfield, as you know, were damaged as well. But the tornado swept through the south end of Springfield and headed east, causing a lot of damage. I remember at the time we were in the newsroom, as soon as we saw this, I and a photographer who were there jumped into a news car and tried to get out and get some video as best we can and do some reporting. The first place we went down toward Columbus Avenue in Springfield near the Memorial Bridge. The challenge was logistically driving around because so much of the debris had blocked the roads. Trees were down, part of buildings were down. So eventually we made our way up toward East Springfield, toward the Island Pond Road and Allen Street. And my, oh my, were those homes damaged up in that area, not too far from the old Cathedral High School. And I remember one street in particular, we just had to park and walk to it because there was so much debris. This looked like a war zone. It looked like some street that had been bombed during World War II. You looked down the street and all you saw were pieces of houses on the street, refrigerators, furniture, sofas, chairs, all strewn about over the front yards, over the street. And I remember one distinct incident. There was an elderly gentleman in his house. The roof had been ripped off by the tornado. He was sitting there stunned and shocked on his front steps. And, we ran up to him, my photographer and I, and said, "Are you okay, sir?" He was bleeding a little. He said, No, I'm okay. We didn't know what to do. We didn't want to leave him alone. And a few minutes later, one of his daughters who lived in the area came running up and was thankful that he was still alive. So she was able to help him. But that's just one man, one family, one house in the devastation you saw there. But it was like that throughout the whole city that was hit hard as well. And of course, a couple of lives were lost as well in West Springfield. We lost some lives. So it could have been a lot worse in terms of human toll, but the physical toll for that tornado that just kept going east was just incredible. I had never seen anything like that. It covered a couple of tornadoes that went through the region years and years ago. One was in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. The other was near Windsor Locks in Connecticut. And there was some isolated pockets of damage as they went through. But the key to this tornado is that it went through a city, went through an urban area with buildings, with people, causing all that horrendous damage. And it took years and years and years for the city to rebuild. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons the MGM Casino is in downtown Springfield, because it was built on the site, on the ruins of part of the South End that was devastated by that tornado. But, the people and the stories of that tornado and the way the city came together and the area rebuilt is a good story as well. So, yeah, that is etched in my mind very, very clearly. Won't forget the pictures and the interviews that day.
Absolutely, and as a result, it's kind of West Springfield and Springfield, as I said before, with the
Yep.
casino. It's we've kind of rebuilt and stuff, and kind of changed, and our landscape and Memorial Ave as well too.
They have come back. They sure have. And it's a little eerie because we've done follow-up stories on the anniversary. Like we've been up to that area in Springfield I told you about, where all the roofs are blown off, all the trees are down. And it's interesting because you go and you look at the homes on that street, they all have new roofs from the tornado. And there are are trees that have been replanted, but small trees.
Yeah.
So you don't have the large trees you did in that neighborhood before. So there's kind of an eerie feeling of what had transpired, what had gone through there. But that area is starting to rebuild, grow again, and try to get back to as normal as you possibly can. But there's still visible signs that are etched in people's minds about that horrific day.
Sorry, jumping into family. You are married, yes?
So,
You
yep,
are.
I am married, happily so, I might add.
Absolutely.
I got to say that.
Uh,
And as a matter of fact, this February, coming up this February, my wife and I will be married 49 years.
oh, wow.
So, and we have 3 children, grown children, and 6 grandchildren.
Wow.
So part of my retirement schedule is making road trips to visit the kids, which is great. My son
Right.
lives in Rochester. He's married. He has 2 daughters. One of my daughters lives in Columbia, Maryland.
Yeah.
She's married, has 2 young children. And my other daughter lives in Richmond, Virginia, and she has 2 boys. One is 1, and one is 19 years old. So the age gamut for my grandkids are 1 to 19. So they cover a wide range. But we make a lot of road trips, obviously, to see the grandkids kids as much as we can. So that is very heartening to see. You know, as you grow older and you have a family of your own, you have children of your own, and then they get married and have kids, and you become grandparents. So the life cycle does move on. But it's very pleasurable for us to jump in the car and drive down and see the kids for a few days here and there. And they obviously try to come up as much as they can for the holidays, for Christmas, and that type of thing. So the family element there is very, very important to us.
Wow, nice. Yeah, well, congratulations about you guys' wedding anniversary.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
So how are the kids and grandkids doing?
They are doing very, very well. My son is a high school English teacher and curriculum development coordinator in Rochester, New York. He's at McQuaid Academy. One of my daughters is a physical therapist. She works part-time now because she's got 2 young girls, but she's a physical therapist, and she works in a county hospital in Maryland. She also works in the burn unit at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore because burns is her specialty as a physical therapist, the burn unit. And my other daughter is a teacher by trade, and recently she got her certificate as a pharmacy technician. And she's working down in the Richmond, Virginia area now as a pharmacy technician. So they're all gainfully employed, happily married, and raising children of their own. So the kids, knock on wood, are doing well, and we're very, very proud of them. We really are.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's doing great. That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's awesome.
it's all you hope for as a parent, that your kids stay healthy, they're happy, they get good jobs, and if they're blessed to have a family, that's wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. And moving on, any sort of classic family stories at all that you like to tell?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, we were a very close-knit family, and the one thing we like to do is spend as much time as we could together on vacation. And we would have a favorite spot in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. We would go up there every year, rent a cottage up there on Newfound Lake. And that was sort of our family retreat for summer vacations. So all the kids used to head up there, my cousins, my uncles, before we had families. But that's a very special place for us because not only did we go there as kids, I did as a kid, but then as we married, our spouses went up there. As we had children, our families went up there, our kids, now our grandkids are going up there. So it's a very special place where we go to for summer vacations, and the family, gets a chance to spend time together. That's the most important thing. You can't have too much time together as a family with your kids and with your grandkids. So that's a very special time for us. We look forward to it certainly every single year. Wish we could spend more time together, but the kids grow up, they move away. and you've got to make the best of what you can. So you've got to really cherish those moments together.
Of course, of course. So, who do you think is your most important person in your life?
I would say a couple of I've got to say my parents, first of all, forever grateful and thankful to them because um, they were loving parents, hardworking. They instilled in me a strong work ethic, which if I didn't have, I wouldn't have been able to be as successful as I have in my own career. I was the first to go to college in my family. My parents worked very hard. They were blue collar people, worked very hard to put me through college. I will forever be grateful for that. And just the fact that they always taught me not only to work hard, but respect others, to have good, strong values, good character values, have a good sense of family, love your family, be loyal and true to your family. So my parents really instilled in me, I think, that the values that I still exhibit as an adult today. And I was grateful that they did. They spent a lot of time loving us and giving us these values, and I look up to them and thank them, all the time, really.
It's great to hear. And I know you've had plenty of happy moments
Oh
within
yeah.
your lifetime as well too. What would you say is the happiest out of all of them?
Uh, there were not one, but there were a few. I'll never forget, look on my parents' face when I graduated from college. Here there was their first, only their oldest kid getting a diploma from college, from Emerson College in Boston. They were proud as punch, if you will, and that was a proud and happy moment, certainly for me as well. And then, meeting the woman I fell in love with, getting married, and then eventually seeing our three children born, had an opportunity to go into the delivery room for the birth of our three children. That was just an incredible, happy experience as well, to see your kids born and to see the kids grow up, develop, and be good citizens and good kids, good people, good people. So those were very, very joyous and happy moments, I think, in my life, being able to go through that and see my parents so proud.
Of course. What are some important life lessons that you learned as well too?
Um, Over the years, you learn things through osmosis, through experience, through hard knocks, and so forth. If I had any advice to give people, younger people, the life lessons I've learned is that if you have a goal or goals, if you work hard, and if you have a passion in life, if you have something you want to pursue, do it. Set yourself goals, work hard, and there's nothing you cannot achieve. If you had told me when I was a freshman in high school, I'd end up being a broadcaster on the air for 50 years, I would have said you had to get your head examined. But eventually, as my passion was kindled in broadcasting, I set career goals for myself, and I worked very hard because it didn't come easily. I worked at the school radio stations, the TV stations, tried to hone my skills as a broadcaster, as a reporter, looked at others in the business to try to learn from them. So I worked very, very hard in doing that. So goals, hard work, and respect people, no matter who they are, what they do. Show them respect and courtesy. My mom always told me that, be good to people, respect people, and they will respect you. Whether you're covering a story about somebody down and out, a homeless person or whatever, they do have their dignity. You do respect them, as a human being, as a person. So respect for others, hard work, setting goals are lifelong lessons that I learned, I think that were beneficial to me in my career, and I think would be helpful to anyone, no matter what your career is. Just be honest, sincere, hardworking, and good things will happen.
Wow. Proudest moments in your career. How would what were those? Sorry. What
Yeah.
are your proudest moments in your life?
Uh, my proudest moments personally, of course, the family stories I have mentioned, the marriage, the children. Professionally, some of the proudest moments of the first proudest moment was when I first got the job on the radio station. But then I was fortunate in that I worked with good colleagues and good mentors and was able to develop a style and a working ability that allowed me to be successful at what I did. I had the honor of not too long ago being inducted into the Massachusetts Broadcasters Hall of Fame, which I never thought I would get into, but I did based on my work and my career. So that was very rewarding for me. I was very proud. So I've gotten a number of accolades over the years, which as a professional, when you're a reporter every day covering stories, you're not thinking of, oh, I'm going to win an award for this story, that story, or whatever. You do your job every day. You go out and you try to do a story that's fair, objective, that seeks the truth, the facts, and present it to the people. The awards that come along later are like frosting on the cake. They're very good, and you're glad to receive them. But you don't get into the business to win awards. You get into the business to be a good reporter, to dig, to investigate, and present objective stories. So I guess my proud moments are the fact that over the years, I've been able to develop, I think, a good working relationship with the audience. And I think if people are watching me or watching my work, they'll acknowledge that I did try to do a good job, a fair job, an objective job, and present both sides in a way that was fair and balanced.
Sure. So wrapping this up here.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there anything you want to talk about that we didn't cover?
I think we covered a lot of bases, but I guess in summary, I would say that I feel very fortunate. I feel very blessed. I'm very happy at my station in life right now. I met a wonderful woman I fell in love with 49 years ago. We are still very much in love. We've raised our family, and that has been a blessing for me. Professionally, I've been blessed as well too. I've been in good situations, been at the right place at the right time, and I think I've tried to seize that moment, given the opportunity, you try to take advantage of that opportunity and do well for yourself. So personally and professionally, I'm happy at where I am now. I'm at a different point in my life now. I'm retired. We've opened up a whole new chapter in our lives, so we've moved on to different things. But I try not to lose sight of the fact that this area and the people in Western Massachusetts have been wonderful to me. They've been great to me. The stories that they tell me have been great. And I hope they realize that I appreciate that as well. I think Western Massachusetts is the best place to live to bring up your family. The people here are the best. I've seen that over the years during good times and bad times. And sometimes during these tragic stories, these stories, you see the best in people. Sometimes the worst brings out the best in people. Western Massachusetts people are wonderful people. They're generous, they're hardworking, and they're very, very good people. They're salt of the earth here, and I was proud in my career to be a broadcaster in this area for so long. My hometown, the area I grew up in, and I couldn't have asked for much more than that as a reporter, so I'm very thankful.
And your final question: how would you like to be remembered by?
Oh boy.
Not to put you on a
I
spot here.
think, I'd like to be remembered as a good family man, as a guy who loves his family, loves his community, professionally as a reporter who was hardworking, honest, sincere, was credible, and presented stories over the years to people in a balanced, objective way so that when they looked at me on television, they believed me. They knew that I was honest, I was telling the truth, and I was doing the best I could to be a good reporter and present both sides of the story. So, remembered as a good family man, a man of faith. Faith is very important to me. And also a professional who tried to do the very best he could day in and day out in a challenging business that often has a lot of unforeseen turns and twists along the way. So I think, and hopefully, being a guy who was respectful of others as well. As I told you before, I respect what you do. And no matter who I interviewed, who I talked to, who I met, I try to show them respect as I would expect them to show me. So I think if we respect each other, it's a good area in which to start a relationship and move on from there. So a nice guy, a good guy that respects others, a family man, and somebody who tried to do the best job he could as a reporter day in and day out.
So, on behalf of the Rotary Club of West Springfield, we'd like to thank you for taking part of West Side Legacy Stories.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so so this has been another West Side Legacy Stories. Thank you so much for watching. I am Hayden Kostansky, signing off.